Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Laura Faulconer. I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I am 41 years old. If you can't tell from my accent, I didn't originally come from Australia. I've lived here since 2012 and absolutely love being in the innovation ecosystem here. My journey on how I got here and to what I'm doing. I'm a PhD in Biomedical Engineering. If you'd asked me even 3 years ago if I was going to be in FinTech, I probably would have laughed. My career has been a bit nonlinear, and I went from being a PhD in biomedical engineering, kind of, I guess, dipping my toes into the world of what it took to commercialize medical devices through my dissertation research. And down the rabbit hole I went. And from there, I founded a medical device accelerator program. I then built a fund that attached to that accelerator program. I spent some time teaching at science entrepreneurship. I've worked in a number of different VC funds, going from medtech to deep tech to tech and now FinTech. I don't think I appreciated at the outset the intense complexity of FinTech ventures. It's another highly regulated space, similar to medical devices. And I'm really enjoying the challenge of that and learning a completely new industry. So where to start there? When I set up the medical device accelerator program, I had seen this model that had started in the US called an accelerator, where these early stage startups would get the support that they needed to kind of understand the nuts and bolts basics of how to get started and how to get those initial proof points around what they were doing. And I saw that that model was working in the US, and I could translate that across to what I was seeing in medical devices, which is some of those earliest challenges are really similar and repeatable, and yet everybody was having to go and learn them themselves, and it was taking a lot of time, and there wasn't a clear pathway that could help maybe that PhD or postdoc who wanted to commercialize their technology understand what that first step looked like and understand what a non-academic career pathway might look like for them to take this technology and really accelerate that tech to have real world clinical impact. And so I took the parallels of what was working in that kind of tech generalist model and applied it into a medical device framing of what does it take to get these early stage medical device technologies to market. And that worked really, really well. There was a lot of demand. It was the first alongside the Cicada medical device training program that started at the same time as I started my program based in Melbourne. They were based in Sydney, and really grew from there. What I didn't appreciate was how difficult getting the funding into those ventures would be. And so what I was seeing was that some of the best ventures were going and raising funding in the US and in China. And at those times, I think sentiment has somewhat changed, but at those times, it was very common for VC funds to require their investee companies to kind of physically locate alongside them or kind of be in the same town. And so when you had an Australian startup on the other side of the planet, they were being required to relocate to California to be with their investors, or, you know, relocate to China. And I saw a lot of brain drain from Australia happening. And so I recognized that we really needed to do something to invest in these ventures here domestically. And you know, this is 2012. Blackbird didn't exist, Square Peg, Airtree. None of these funds that are hallmarks of the VC industry in Australia today existed at that time. There wasn't investment for much, startup at all, but especially for medtech. So I spent quite a bit of time trying to cultivate the angel network. Shout out to Med Angels who have successfully nailed that process that I failed miserably at, but did get there in the end in terms of getting a proper fund together to invest in companies coming through my Accelerator program. That was an interesting balance of knowing when to give up or knowing when to push on. It was not easy to raise those funds. It took quite a bit of time. And my co-founder and I had a conversation about, should we give up? Is this going to work? And then a week later, we got a phone call that it was fully funded and we were moving ahead. So that was an interesting kind of reflection for me of, when you might just give it that little bit extra, because if we had fully walked away, we could have really missed a big opportunity to impact the medical device sector in Australia. That program now operates out of 3 countries and has raised subsequent investment funding. So it's doing really well. Why did I leave it if it's doing so well? I, at the same time as having launched the Accelerator program and gotten the fund together, and while working with Monash University to stand up their flagship entrepreneurship program, I also had 2 little babies. And I really just reached a point where I wanted to refocus on family and have a complete reset of my work-life balance. So I stepped away from those initiatives and left them with my co-founder, who's still doing amazing things building them. And completely had a sea change, reset my work-life balance. And I went to work for a micro VC fund in New Zealand. And my husband was full-time carer for our girls for the 3 years that we were over there. And it was an absolutely amazing time in my life that I wouldn't take back for anything. Once the girls were a little bit older, decided to kind of come back to a more, a larger innovation ecosystem. New Zealand has an amazing innovation ecosystem, and I absolutely loved being a part of it. But coming back closer to family and being in a larger innovation ecosystem led me to where I am today, which is at X15 Ventures. We are the venturing arm for Commonwealth Bank. We have a slightly different model than most bank or corporate venturing outfits. We are very focused on the strategic rationale and how we partner and unlock opportunities for the ventures that we build, buy, or invest in. And for me, that's been really interesting to learn a completely new model of how we do early stage innovation and how we partner. The reason why, one of the reasons why I decided to join was I had been reflecting that most of my career, I had been pushing ventures towards strategic partnership, because the reality is that, especially for Australian ventures, IPO is probably not the pathway to liquidity in that venture. The much more likely pathway is via M&A, where you get bought by a larger business. And I'd spent a whole bunch of time working with founders towards that pathway, and yet I'd never actually sat on the other side of the table. And so I wanted to have the opportunity to really eat, breathe, and sleep that decision process so that I could understand it more fully. And the role at X15 is fascinating because I get to still do exactly what I love, which is invest in early stage ventures, but I also get to be in the driver's seat of M&A type activities as well. So overarchingly, it aligned with where I wanted to kind of lean into learning next, and still get to work with complex ventures doing what I love. Back in Sydney these days, from after New Zealand, and really enjoying the lifestyle that Sydney offers.
Wow, Laura, what an amazing journey you've had. It's really funny listening to you speak, because we've been in the same spaces and have been missing each other. I lived in New Zealand for 21 years. I've only been in Melbourne for 2 years, so we could have met back home. New Zealand is my citizenship. Where can I start to unpack your story? Okay, so let's start off with understanding what your current investor thesis is right now.
Yep. So X15, we are not a high volume investor. So it's much more about making sure that the number or the types of ventures that we invest in are ones that we either should be building, because otherwise we're just going to make it really slow and really expensive. And making sure that we are investing in ventures where we can provide significant unlock. At the moment, where we're focusing is, quite close to core type opportunities, wider adjacencies. The pathway to partnership, it's not impossible, it's just a lot harder. And so one of the things that I've been focusing on in my role is kind of two types of investments. One is that the partnership is clear up front, and we can immediately move into partnership mode at the time that we're investing in that opportunity. Or it's an earlier proposition, and they don't quite have the readiness for partnering with Australia's largest bank. But we can see that there's something there that we want to invest the time in helping them identify and articulate what is that pathway to partnership and how can we cultivate that. In terms of what that looks like stage-wise, that means that we're typically looking, when it's an investment type opportunity, we're looking at kind of seed plus to Series A stage opportunities. But we do also build, and that has a unique lens on it, where that's from ground zero. And in terms of sectors, the types of opportunities that we're looking for, we go through a process where we look at different thesis areas that we might want to really drive significant value to our customers by diving deep into. But we are also agnostic and generalist, so we can be reactive to what's happening in market. If I think about some of the opportunities that are bubbling up right now, Gen AI is absolutely one of those. It's an interesting space for a bank to be thinking about, and one that we need to think about very carefully about when and how we do something material in that space. But I personally believe that Gen AI is going to be the largest shift to user interfaces that we've seen since the advent of the iPhone. And that's massive. And so we need to be at the forefront of what's happening there and looking at how we embed the benefit of that shift into our experiences. And secondly to that, frauds, scams, data security, privacy, pretty much anything in that space is something that I'm actively interested in right now. So much is changing. While you still get a lot of unsophisticated attacks, the sophistication level is going way, way up, and customers expect the bank to keep them safe. And so we're very interested in staying at the front of what's happening there.
Wow. That is absolutely fascinating. Now, if we start looking at, jargon and terminology, a lot of my community are startups, are people going into trying to secure investors. And I'm always trying to use this podcast to educate. So you mentioned IPO as an option and the buyout option. Can you explain what IPO means and what the buyout option means, if I understood what you said correctly?
Yes. So IPO is a public listing. So you basically sell ownership in your business on the public market, like the ASX, or you could choose to list elsewhere. The reality is that for most Australian ventures, that's either not available to them or will significantly complicate your business. And what I see is that a lot of Australian ventures that go that pathway perhaps go that pathway too early and create a lot of complexity in the business, which is why I tend to look towards M&A and buyout as the liquidity pathway, if that's what you're trying to do. Some people are trying to build generational businesses and they're not looking for that, pathway to something else. But if you are looking for a pathway to something else, then finding that strategic partner that could eventually buy your business is an interesting way to explore.
That's fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey from being an associate professor teaching entrepreneurship to the venture capitalist to the angel investor? What inspired the transition?
I guess the steel thread for me is woven from the balance of two things. I have always said that I'm opportunity driven and I want to challenge myself. And so anytime that I've shifted in the type of role that I'm doing or the sector that I'm playing in, it's usually some kind of balance between there was an interesting opportunity to tackle, either it's something that I wanted to do or an opportunity that presented itself, and it stretched me in kind of new and interesting directions. And so I've always just been willing to take that risk and take the approach of what's the worst that could happen. I maybe take a career break and start looking for what's next. And that's what's led me to those unique pathways. And, teaching, dabbled in that. Teaching is a generational career path in my family. So I guess it isn't any surprise that I dabbled in teaching. So much of my career has been about unlocking the pathway for ridiculously smart people that were probably going to get there anyway without my help. I just helped them avoid some time wasting steps. And so teaching science entrepreneurship was really just another lens on that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, when I was doing my research on all of your work, I found that you have a unique approach called the guide on the scale. Can you explain what this approach entails and how it's been instrumental in your career?
Yeah, guide on the side is how I describe my approach to working with founders. So much of early stage opportunity exploration is about obsessing over the same set of questions, like what is the customer problem that you're solving in all of its nuanced complexity? What is the best way to solve that problem, which is not necessarily the way that you'd originally thought that you were going to solve that problem. So being a guide on the side is about these questions and asking them a lot. It's super rare that I've got some major insight, but by poking holes and challenging assumptions, it's how I've helped some founders iterate towards solving bigger problems in bigger ways.
Fantastic. So with 15 years experience in taking IP-rich technologies to market, can you share some key insights in the challenges and opportunities that are in this space?
Yeah, fundamentally at the early stages, it is all about people. In the areas that I invest in, it's actually pretty rare that the tech just doesn't work. But it's more about, can the founders build a high performance team? Can they stay motivated through the ups and downs? Can they create a group of engaged investors and advisors that will go on the journey with them? This is where things are a lot more likely to come unstuck.
It's all about the team.
Yes.
That's interesting. Now, you mentioned that Gen AI is the place we should focus. Again, my community are at different stages in their knowledge of all of the terminology and jargon. Explain what is Gen AI and why you particularly think it's something we should be focusing on.
Yeah, Gen AI is, Chat GPT. It's large language models, and the level of maturity of these technologies has come leaps and bounds in the last few years. And really, it's just in the last year that the world has woken up to the technology that exists here and where it's going and what it can do. I believe that it will eventually touch all aspects of business, really around like providing efficiencies. I don't think there's going to be one silver bullet for Gen AI that can do everything. So much is about how it's trained and what it's trained to do. So an example that was at a really interesting talk that I went to at South by Southwest, talking about Gen AI and the future of it, is that when he was using ChatGPT to help him do some research, he asked it to generate a list of books and articles that were written by renowned people in that space so that he could shortcut his research. And it gave him a list immediately. As it turned out, all it did was identify people that were publishing a lot in that space and then make up titles of articles that they could have written about that topic, but didn't actually write, because that's not what the model's trying to do. It's not trying to help him do research. It's trying to just answer the question, not necessarily accurately. And so that's where I think we will get quite specialized tools. You will have tools that will help you do that kind of research. You will get tools that will help you be creative and make up things that people could have written but didn't, and maybe actually go write it for them. That's where the direction of travel is, and what I'm interested in, and where those specializations where we can get outsized value from leaning in early.
Fantastic. So as an investor and a director, you've been involved in various startups. What criteria do you consider when evaluating potential investments? and advising startups, especially in your new role now?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's people. You have to be able to work well as a partnership. I always describe investments as a partnership. So it's easy for the companies to view the investor as having a power imbalance because they have the money. I don't necessarily think that's the case, because the ventures hold all of the power in what this becomes. And together is how you really get to really interesting outcomes. So if they don't want to work with me beyond money, that's not a good outcome for me. And if I can't add value to them beyond money, that's not a good outcome for them. And if we don't want to work together because there's friction in the relationship, that's also not a good outcome. And so first and foremost, do I want to work with them, and do they want to work with me over the long term? Because it's very rare that there's an overnight success. These businesses are built to be successful over at least 3, 4, 5 years, but usually it's much more like a 10-year journey. We want to work together for a long time.
Okay. So in your experience, what role does comprehensive market validation play in the success of early stage startups, and how do you approach it?
Yeah, look, this is one that is near and dear to my heart. Most folks have heard about product market fit process, and you can Google that. There's tons of resources out there about product market fit. And what that is about how you seek early data points that confirm whether your product finds a strong market demand. But I've pushed founders to take a big step back and really think carefully about problem market fit, which is first confirming that you're in a good market before you move into product market fit. Because you need to make sure that you're building for the right problem before you prove that you can build a product. And it helps you avoid some things like solution bias, where you could actually be starting with the wrong solution. Whereas if you zoomed out for a second and really understood the problem, you would come to a completely different articulation of what the best solution is. And it is that process of going through that problem market fit, challenging your assumptions, that is how you can get to that revision of what the problem is, and then therefore what the solution is to solve that problem.
Yeah, a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we are so much in the business, we don't have that bird's eye view, just zooming out, and you can miss a lot of things. So your expertise would obviously help in that perspective, correct?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of it is just challenging the assumptions that the ventures have made, and asking why a lot and again and again, and just helping them make sure that they are building a viable business, not confirming that they can build a specific product, because most people are actually really smart and they can go and whack together a product. But that doesn't make it a business. And you have to think more holistically about the business that will be commercializing that product.
I like that. So financial modeling is a critical aspect of startup evaluation. Can you walk us through your approach to creating and assessing financial models for startups?
Yeah, you don't have to be an expert at everything. And I think a good skill to learn is recognizing what you aren't good at and making sure that you surround yourself with those skills. Now, that's not to say that a founder doesn't have to be absolutely across their numbers. They do. They should know what are the key levers in the business? What are the key input metrics that are driving the outcomes in their business? And if they can't really get into the detail there, that's a worrying signal. But do they have to be able to put together a beautiful pivot table Excel model? No, they don't. Just make sure that you've got some capability around that in your team. Even though I have a PhD in biomedical engineering and I've done a painful level of maths, I'm actually not a like math in my head person. Just doesn't happen for me. It hasn't held me back. And I know that that's a weakness for me. And so I make sure that I've got the right people around me. And so for founders that maybe feel weaker on the numbers, just make sure that you've got that around you and just make sure that you understand the implications of the numbers rather than being able to put together a highly complicated Excel model. And at the early stages, a highly complicated Excel model isn't helpful because most of it's made up and untested at this point anyway.
That's so true. So fundraising can be a daunting task for many entrepreneurs. What advice would you give to founders seeking secure investment in their startups?
Fundraising is an absolutely critical skill. What terminology that I've used before is, most early stage ventures lurch insolvency point to insolvency point. So the primary goal of the founder is to keep the venture liquid and continuing to have the resources to iterate and find that path to market. But I do think it is a misconception that you need to be able to give a TED style talk. The fundamental here is, can you tell a simple story that anyone, including someone like me, who is the non-expert in your field investor, to be able to understand what the problem is, how you're solving it, and how you're going to make money. With fundraising, if it's not something that you are inherently strong at, get a mentor. You're going to get told no a lot. Having a mentor there by your side will help because that doesn't feel good. But it also means that they can work with you to get to a quick no or recognize when you've got one, a quick no that you haven't actually acknowledged as a quick no yet. We can help you calibrate feedback after every pitch. And what that will mean is that you will be more efficient in fundraising and you'll probably end up with better terms as a result.
I like that. So have you been involved in accelerator programs? Or you have been involved with accelerator programs. How can accelerators benefit startups? And what should founders look for when considering accelerator opportunities?
Yeah, with accelerator programs, I think that most of them have fundamentally sound models. What accelerator programs need to make sure that they do is set that company up for success. If you've got funny terms or excessive dilution going into the business very early, then it doesn't matter how good that business could have been. They won't be able to get down their capital pathway. And so particularly for new accelerators coming on, making sure that they are structuring how they're backing those startups to not create unintended consequences down the track is really important. The view that I embrace is structuring the terms that obviously I need to make a financial return or I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. However, if I can make sure that there's alignment between me getting a good outcome and the company getting a good outcome, and then orienting towards what's good for the company is therefore good for my shareholding in the company, it leads me to make different decisions than how do I get the best return on my investment, and that is my sole lens. So that, orientation towards what's best for the company and what's best for the company over the long term is what I'd strongly encourage accelerators to be thinking about. When founders are thinking about, should I join an accelerator program? Which accelerator program should I join? There's a whole lot of considerations, but the first one is, can they add unique value to my opportunity? Where I have seen things struggle is it's kind of a square peg in a round hole. You might have some specific, business venture model that is very niche. And if you go through a generalist accelerator program, a lot of the advice might actually be counterproductive. So think carefully if there are specialist options and that are aligned with what you're building, choose the specialist option every time. If there aren't specialist options, then what you should look for is back to what I said before. Are they setting you up for long-term success? And are you likely to connect with other people that could be the mentors in the program? It could be other participants in the program. It could be investors that invest off the back end of that program. Are you likely to connect with people that are going to be important for your commercialization pathway? If the answer is yes, and they've got appropriate terms, and you're likely to get value from participating, have a go.
Yes, I love that. So my last question is, diversity and inclusion are increasingly important in the tech and startup ecosystems. What steps can investors, founders, and the broader community take to promote diversity and equity in these fields? And this one is very, very personal for me. When I moved to Melbourne, I pitched an idea for my first tech startup to the New Zealand, Australia Women in Technology Awards. I won the first prize, got really excited that I was launching a new career at the age of 56. But what I have found is I have so many strikes against me, Laura. Number one, I'm Black. Number two, I'm in tech. Number three, I'm female. It's a big issue. What can be done?
Look, we've come a very long way. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of pockets where diversity is lacking. For example, I still regularly, more than I would like to, give feedback to startups on the composition of their executive and governance teams, which is limiting the diversity of thinking that they have available to them. And I still attend events that are notably imbalanced, and I still regularly meet people like yourself that have, banged their heads into multiple, seemingly immovable brick walls. And that's super unfortunate, but I do think that we do need to step back and recognize how far we have come. We still have a pipeline problem, but I think we are getting close to critical mass of women at levels of seniority in VC funds and corporates in Australia that are changing what the next cohorts look like. And so while it might not be perfect for us, I do think that the journey will be increasingly early for those easier, not easy, that come behind us. And so one of the tools that I use, the easiest place to be thinking about this is around recruiting for new roles. When I'm recruiting for a new role, I require my long list to be 50% gender balanced and then represent sufficient diversity of thought. So do I have people from different career pathways, or do they all come from the investment banking style pathway to venture capital? Do they have different cultural experiences, et cetera, et cetera? And once I've got a sufficiently diverse long list, that means that the playing field is much more leveled. And while it doesn't mean that every hire I make will represent diverse talent, it gets to a more balanced outcome overall. Now, if you take that approach and extrapolate it across the number of women that are in powers of hiring teams around them, I think we're going to start to really see that shift in the cohorts coming through.
And what is Commonwealth Bank policy when they are picking projects? What is Commonwealth Bank's diversity policy plan to support diverse entrepreneurs?
Yeah, we have a whole people experience team within X15. So one of the interesting ways that X15 has approached building opportunities is where we need to have a unique, tailored approach that isn't going to be well suited from the bank to these early stage ventures. We build in-house capability around that within X15. So for example, we have in-house risk, procurement, legal, and people experience. And that people experience team is incredibly focused around are we attracting diverse talent into our ventures and into our core team? How are we supporting our talent broadly, and specifically, how are we supporting diverse talent to feel included? Not just feel, but to be included. Yes. And then how are we making sure that we are giving consistent experiences across the board? And so absolutely love the work that they're doing. For example, we're getting ready to roll out a mentoring program where we're pairing more of the senior folks with more junior folks, so that we've got that tighter relationship over time, where we can bring people along. And I've just signed up to be a mentor in that program.
Fantastic. That's very, very exciting. Laura, thank you so much for coming online and sharing with us today. Do you have a website, anywhere where people can contact you directly that we can share? What is the best way for people to connect?
LinkedIn. Message me on LinkedIn is the best way.
Fantastic. So let me share your LinkedIn profile here so people can find you. And thank you again for being here with us and sharing who you are, sharing the work that you're doing. It's exciting to see that Commonwealth Bank has got these exciting opportunities coming up. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is connecting you with some amazing and phenomenal people. Tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thanks, Laura. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open,